And just for chuckles, we're gonna have to do full auto. So placement shot, full yeet mode. Very nice. Welcome, I'm Walcom, and this is your endgame best in slot Nerf blaster. It may not be the absolute best at everything, but it is practically the best at everything. If you're gonna try to beat a product out there, this is the one you gotta try to beat. This is the Sweetheart Storm, a very expensive, very complicated, very powerful, and very, very nice custom AEG style blaster that was sent to me by Frontline Foam. If you want to pick one up, there will be a link down in the description, and I thank them very much because this thing is ludicrously expensive and I wouldn't have one any other way. It's a collaboration device by a certain Mr. Sweetheart in Beijing and also Adelaide Foam Works in Australia. And there's quite literally nothing else like it. Even if some performance metrics may be up to par with other AEG style blasters, this thing is a cut above. In fact, it is so good that for about the past 2 years, every single time I talk about an AEG style blaster, multiple comments will tell me it's not as good as this and you need to pick one of these things up. And yeah, they were right. This is the best Nerf blaster money can buy. But should you? And I don't mean that like, oh, it's a pretty expensive purchase that you should be financially responsible. Really think about if you should buy one of these. I don't know. Literally, should you even pick one of these things up? What do I mean? Well, let's start at the actual blaster itself. This being an AEG style blaster is a Springer blaster that is powered by a LiPo battery. In this case, a 3S or 4S LiPo. Basically, it's like your Nerf Retaliator with a plunger tube, a spring and everything. You attack it back, it builds up air pressure, fires dart out of the barrel, but it uses a motor to do that, which is powered by a battery. So, like your Nerf Stampede on steroids. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but the Sweetheart Storm works unlike any other blaster I've ever seen. And it works completely unlike any other AEG out there where, like, instead of having a bunch of random gears and gear ratios, it really only has like the one big tube setup. Big huge motor drives big huge gear, and it has an insane gear reduction that makes it so nice to use. All the red you see on here, and then of course this blue metal right there is all, well, metal, but everything else is 3D printed with the exception of the grip. I do believe this is PETG, so it should be thermal resistant, stuff like that. Not that I've left it in my car to find out, but it is really solidly printed. It's a little ghosty. It's not the highest quality ever, but it is more than functional. The grips are swappable. They are AEG style grips. This one is an Amoeba grip and it is exceptionally comfortable, but the handguard, the receiver, and everything like that is all metal, and the internals are all metal. But the first big problem with this blaster is that it is expert level. It is beyond expert level. If you've ever played San Francisco Rush in the arcade, and at the car selection screen, you scroll all the way to the right and sirens start blaring and there's a Bugatti in a cage and it just goes, it's dangerous when you pick it. That is this blaster. You have to regularly take this thing apart, service and lube it, or else it will destroy itself. And it is not a fun or interesting blaster to take apart, I assure you. Which also means if you want to swap out springs, the second big thing you'd want to do with a blaster like this, it's pretty much every single time you do that, you roll a dice if you're going to break something or not. So yeah, it is pretty freaking heavy, and most of the weight is right back here in the rear, which is an integrated stock and everything like that, and it has a 3D printed butt pad, and honestly, it feels just fine. You can swap out the handguard for a 3D printed affair if you want. This one's pretty cool, and it's just covered in M-LOK slots. This is an exceptionally long 16mm outer diameter. This is an exceptionally long 16mm outer diameter barrel that is compatible with pretty much every single B car out there. And the one I suggest you use for this is going to be the HQ Technologies one because it works really good with it. And of course, we got a Picatinny rail right here, all the M-LOK to put on whatever rails and accessories you want. You've got the magazine well right here. It's got a big paddle release and it is a Talon compatible blaster. This hump right here is actually part of the charging system, so it's gonna be there, which makes the blaster asymmetrical. I'm sorry about that for those of you that offends. You've got a dial right here that you can slide back and forth that will change how far back the pusher breech goes. And then you've got the battery spot, which is located right here. And it has an XT30 connector. As I stated previously, this blaster uses either 3S or 4S LiPos. I'm gonna use a 4S. It doesn't change the power, but it does change the response time and the cycling rate. Did I mention this thing is select fire? Because of course it is. Screw that back together and we're ready to go, with the exception of the select fire switch. It's a little difficult to see, but we got a 3-position switch right here. All the way in the reverse position, it is on safe. Trigger does nothing. We will talk about this trigger. Oh my God, will we talk about this trigger? Don't you worry, we're gonna talk about it. And then if you flip it up to the middle, the blaster primes itself and it is in semi-auto mode. Oh, you can hear that. There's a lot of disgust right there. But if you put it all the way in the forward position, and it's a really nice thing where it's kind of hard to accidentally manipulate it, it goes into full auto. Here's a cycling rate. Not the fastest thing ever, but also not the slowest. And if you put it all the way into the rearward position and pull the trigger, it deprimes the blaster. So before we check out the Sweetheart Storm's performance, we need to talk about this trigger, because this should be the standard on every single electronic blaster. It is the best. It is more than the best. And it's so unbelievably simple. I don't like intellectual property theft, but it's too good of an idea to be relegated to one blaster. It is quite literally a bare micro switch. You can actually see the button right there, where instead of the like metal lever hood, it's got its own design from Sweetheart Storm, and it is, you can hear that. There is no take up, no wiggle. It is on, off, super springy, super nice. It's the best. This is the best trigger, and the response time from the actual blaster itself is so high that this thing feels like a dream. In fact, it feels criminal to use this thing on full auto. Semi-auto only, in my opinion. Using this blaster will make everything, even like the BK1S, which is a phenomenal blaster, especially for the price, feel like absolute garbage. It is quite literally that good. And because you can swap out the grip with whatever AEG style grip you want, as long as it doesn't have like over aggressive dovetail for the looks of it. Yeah, handling wise, this thing is a dream, especially when all the weight is in the back and it's just super pointable. This thing is the highest handling of pretty much any blaster I've ever used. It is so I can't, please take this through the screen and hold it for yourself and use it. It's just the best. All right, Freddy, this is what you live for. The absolute pinnacle of foam flinging technology. 307, 310, 300, 311.9, 298.5. Good boy. Good boy. I'll get you a snack later. And that's with standard AF Pro darts. Not that these are bad, but they're pretty much bottom of the barrel when it comes to short darts. They're just easily accessible. So it can do better. Yeah, you may have a blaster that shoots faster than this. You may have a blaster that hits harder than this, but I doubt you're gonna have a blaster that does really good at both those things with this level of response time. It's ridiculous. But let's see how accurate we can be with it. All right, so for our muzzle, we're gonna use the HQ Technologies B-Car, since this is the best one I have ever used, especially for high velocity. And for an optic, we're gonna use an ACOG, because why not? There we go. All right, so first things first. Looks like it's shooting up and to the left. All right, let's see how accurate that actually is. The scope is obviously not sighted. This ACOG isn't sighted in, but let's see what happens. All right, let's try this again. Yeah, 91. This thing doesn't joke around. Any little bit of movement, especially with a magnified optic, does throw me off, but I am aiming pretty far left of the target right now. .84, and just for chuckles, we're gonna have to do full auto. So placement shot. Full yeet mode. Very nice. Yeah, this thing is obscene. And it's got like thousands of rounds through it over the last couple of months, so it's probably well due for a tune-up that I don't know how to do. So all in all, it's an extremely impressive, extremely robust, very excellent at pretty much every single thing foam dart blaster that makes airsofters blush. But the question remains, why don't I recommend you buy this blaster? Because it is, for a very, very niche specific person. Now, if it was in its home country of Australia, it'd be perfect because they use NERF as an analog for paintball or airsoft. So those mad lads go out into the bush and fling foam darts at each other, and for that, you need pretty much the best of the best. But around here in the US, the most common thing we see is a velocity cap or FPS cap, which is typically, depending on what type of game you're playing, anywhere from like 130 to like 200, maybe even 250. This blaster basically annihilates that, and it does it so well, people are pretty much gonna just say you're cheating. In fact, they might just spot ban this blaster because it's just so good. But even if you wanted to use it at those lower velocity games, which is really like owning a McLaren and never driving it outside of the city and never taking it to the track, there's a lot of car analogies in this video. You can take this entire blaster apart and swap out the spring, and you can reduce the barrel length and have a softer hitting Sweetheart Storm, but it is not a quick or easy process. You run the risk of breaking several different parts of the blaster when you do that if anything happens to go wrong. And that's like ripping the engine out of your Ferrari and replacing it with one from a smart car. So if you're ever wondering why I'm always so happy when blasters let you easily swap out springs and barrels and change different velocity points without really doing a whole lot of work, that's why, and that's why this is a hard recommendation. If you do have a game you can use it at, you're gonna need to talk to them first to see if they're even okay with you using something so powerful, because while you can get things to hit 300, 400 FPS, almost all of those are pump action or air powered. AGs like this, and of course HPA blasters, are frowned upon because they're just so freaking much better than pretty much anything else out there. And whether you like this or HPA is completely up to you, because both of them use consumable resources. With HPA, you're either gonna have a big bottle stock on it or an outgoing line, but it will be a far simpler blaster to service and use. That being said, this completely replaces HPA in my opinion, because it's just that freaking awesome. 300 plus FPS select fire, absolutely awesome design. Yeah, it just can't be beat. But you're gonna want to know every inch of this blaster and how to service it. You're gonna wanna find a game that will even let you use it. And you gotta be willing to pay hundreds of dollars for a foam dart blaster. There are cheaper ways to hit 300 FPS. There are cheaper ways to have extremely long-range accurate blasters. There are cheaper ways to have semi-automatic Springer blasters. But no other option is gonna do all those things as good as this at the price point it is hitting, and that is why I can't stop glazing it enough. This has been the tyrant of the Nerf blaster game for years. There are multiple iterations of this blaster. I don't even know which version this is. It's whatever one Frontline Foam sells. But if you're cool with every little nitpick negative I've said about this thing, you're going to absolutely freaking love the Sweetheart Storm.